Chair, I'd like to support the views currently expressed. My understanding is the figures we have ahead of us have approximately 300 million in savings baked into them, according to the proposed and now defeated Croke Park II proposal. Clearly that has not been agreed by public sector workers. I would be willing to discuss estimates that had them taken out of them, and I would be very much willing to engage in a discussion with the Minister about where that additional saving could be found. But what we know right now is that the estimates ahead of us, if indeed these do have Croke Park II baked into them, are incorrect. And I think it would be wrong for the public sector workers who voted against Croke Park II for us to engage with these numbers which have the Croke Park II proposal baked into them. And I too would suggest that we cease this session and that we discuss how this committee can do some very important work on the estimates as we see them for this year, and not based on a rejected proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Chair. What we're doing here is simply looking at the estimates of my department and the associated agencies that fall within it. It's not 300 million, obviously. The pay savings are the apportioned savings that we would have expected had the Croke Park agreement impacted on my department and the agencies that are under my purview. In essence, what I was faced with last week was, do I publish the estimates on the basis of apportioning, as I thought, a fair way, the 300 million in savings that are implied in the budget arithmetic, or do I not publish the estimates? And they're everybody's estimates. So, taking Deputy Fleming's logic, we can't advance on any estimate in any department until such time as we have a resolution arrived at in relation to the 300 million for this year. Now, that's well and good if you had no responsibility and you could approach it like the Republicans did in America and you could shut down government. But agencies have to be funded, and for example shared services, which is a very important initiative, People Point, need a vote this week to ensure that they can continue to function. Ultimately, every agency of state, all the ones under my purview, over time would need to have a formal vote to continue in existence. I think it's extraordinarily reasonable that we would go through the full estimate of my department and all the agencies under my remit. If and when we have alternative proposals in relation to the savings on wages and on pensions, we'll come back and have those approved separately. It's not unusual at all to have that done. Now, I understand that some of the deputies opposite want to grandstand on the particular focus issue of the Croke Park II deal, because it is an important issue. And I know that during the negotiations period, the only utterance I heard from Deputy Fleming was that the 300 million wasn't ambitious enough, and that he wanted 350 million taken out of the public pay bill for this year. And I actually reread his pre-budget submission as he outlined the details of that, which were to be done by the end of March. And if we didn't have an agreement by the end of March, he laid out, in fairness, the forced measures that he would legislate for, as he did when last in government twice in relation to the public service. So I would ask, we're using up time now, I would ask people, we're going to have a debate later on tonight in the Dáil, in the full Dáil, in relation to all these matters. Let's park Croke Park, if you like, to that forum. Let's have the debate about that, and let's now do our normal business for all the agencies that depend upon us to go through, line by line, the voted monies that will be required to fund services within my department and its associated votes for this year. And when alternatives are determined, if alternatives are determined in relation to the 300 million, I'll come back, and that proportion of it that applies to my department, and I'll ask for your approval for those in a timely fashion, as is normal.
Brief response, Deputy Fleming.
Very brief. I agree with the Minister's logic that we should come back at a later date to discuss the 300 million separately. You should have brought your estimate.
The 300 million.
That affects
I'll
this
let you respond,
department.
Mr. before the question.
Yeah, I accept we're only dealing with your department today, but it's coincidental you're the minister who is centrally involved. The same will happen in every other Oireachtas committee over the next couple of weeks dealing with their estimate. But as you've said, it would make logic. You want to pass these with the Croke Park, rejected Croke Park recommendations in it. If they don't stand up and they're not the final agreement, which can't be because they've been rejected, if you believe in democracy, you'll accept that you will come back with a revision of those figures later. I'm saying you should have come in with the estimates today, not with the Croke Park figures included. You should have dealt with the rest of your estimate, which wasn't contentious and hadn't been rejected by the public service. And as you have said, come back at a later date with that element of the 300 million that affects your department, and we would have discussed that on a separate day, as you seem willing to do. If you'll just remove the Croke Park element from this here today.
Deputy McDonald.
Of course, the Minister is being disingenuous when you say that, we're just dealing with those elements that affect your department. Of course we are, but this procedure will be mirrored right across committees of the Oireachtas. And the total will amount to 300 million as envisaged under Croke Park II. That's what you have accounted for in this estimate. So what's the message then to public and civil servants and to their unions? Is this a ruse, Minister, or is this phase one of forcing Croke Park II even though it's been rejected? Is this the preamble to unilateral action in respect of legislation? That's the question that arises. It's you yourself who have sounded the siren bell saying that you're going to run out of money, that you have this 300 million euro gap in your estimates. So why would you come before the committee and say to us, let's debate these, presumably you're looking for approval for these, knowing that there are gaps within it? That doesn't make any sense at all. And I think the politics of this, Minister, is that you are saying via this committee and other committees of the Oireachtas to public service workers, you may have rejected the deal, but the deal, as you call it, is going ahead anyhow. I think that's deplorable, and I think it's an abuse of this committee, and I think it's an insult to the elected members that sit on it.
Deputy Donnelly.
Thank you. Minister, I understand you're in a difficult position. I do think it's unreasonable, though, to put it to this committee that the expenditure has to be voted on so that services can continue. We're nearly 1/3 of the way through this year, and we're now looking at expenditure, presumably almost 1/3 of which has already been incurred. I think, I could be wrong, but I think we are the only country in the OECD that examines and agrees expenditure 1/3 of the way through. Certainly the analysis I've seen suggests that we're on our own, and that in a lot of other countries, as in most companies, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, Minister, the expenditure gets agreed before the start of the year. I honestly believe that to proceed, I'm not grandstanding, and I mean no, but I'm not engaging in politics. I honestly believe that to proceed with this in light of rejection of Croke Park II would be taken as an insult to many of the 300,000 or thereabouts public sector workers. I really do believe that, and therefore I would ask that this discussion is postponed, hopefully for a short amount of time. I would very much welcome a discussion at this committee around how the 300 million could be found. I believe that the premise of Croke Park II is incorrect. I believe that the money can be found through non-pay, or certainly a chunk of it could be found through non-pay sources. And I would ask the Chair, and I would ask the Minister and my colleagues on the committee to postpone this meeting, because I really do believe it will be taken as a kick in the teeth by very many of the 300,000 or so public sector workers looking at Croke Park II. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
I understand, and I accept Deputy Donnelly's bona fides. He doesn't make a political issue of it. But we spent the first 20 minutes debate on 2% of the vote, which is the pay changes as it impacts on my department and its agencies. I can't present a fraudulent vote. I have to apportion where I think the money should be got across the system. And I've done that in a way that is reasonable, If there's a change in that 2%, I'll come back. And I've asked, that's all I've asked. So we go through the normal way of dealing with this. You know, some of the points made, Deputy Donnelly's talked about, you know, the post facto way that we do estimates. That's going to change this year, as you know. And we had a very good exchange, I think, at question time last week with Deputy Fleming. Under the new two-pack arrangement, we're going to have the budget on the 15th of October. And all estimates will be expected for next year to be passed before the end of December this year. So we'll keep this committee nice and busy, and all of the committees,